feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the PTBNL, the podcast to be named later, which I still swear to God, someone's God, everyone's God, that we will have a name for this eventually. But for now, we are still just the podcast to be named later. I am hosting this one tonight, Shane, and I am joined with three other guys. It was supposed to be most of the team tonight. School's gotten in the way, but I have Andrew. Andrew, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. No, still surviving through this quarantine days. Been just reading a lot of books.
Good. You sound more and more gloom every single time we talk to you, so I know how hard this sports thing is hitting you. So I feel terrible for that. But thanks for hanging in.
No problem.
Then I have Rob on. Rob, how you, sir?
Doing pretty well. Been watching Tiger King all day. This guy is literally
right?
He's Florida man on steroids.
Oh God.
So I have a sub story about that, but I too have been watching that today, and I didn't intend to. So you and I will talk about that, I'm sure, in a little bit. And then we have Biscuit on. Biscuits, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Shane. Thank you for having me on. I think I'm kind of like in reverse shock with all the sports things, like when it happened, like when the NBA suspended the season, and it came out that the MLB was going to suspend indefinitely as well. I think I was calm, whereas a lot of people around me were more like, whoa, like this is nuts. And I'm like, yeah, it's nuts, but like, it's for the best. But now I think it's really hitting me. Earlier, we were watching Doc's no-hitter, and I cried a little bit because I just miss baseball. So it's starting to hit me now. I miss my Phillies.
Yeah, man, it's starting to hit all of us. So I figure that's a good kind of thing to start out with and start on. We just got word again today that this is going to be extended even further. This kind of lockdown period of time. It's going to go through the end of April at this point. Previously, we were told that the expected tentative date for schools to be going back in, a lot of us to go back to work in your facilities, would be kind of the end of the first week of April, and it's been pushed back an additional 3 weeks. Every single bit of news that happens, and every change, and every time you hit a milestone that you thought you were going to turn a corner and instead you're extended, adds a little bit more just surrealism to this entire thing. And I know for all of us, we're all handling it, a little bit differently. I myself am still working out in this mess, so I get a firsthand look at how people behave in this environment. And there are two ends of this spectrum, and there is no one in the middle of it. There are people who are fucking crazy, and then there are people who are just dumb. But it seems like there's no middle on the people who are venturing out at this point. And then I know that some of us are not working currently right now or working from home. So everyone's circumstances are a little bit different. So I figured we just kind of touch in and see how everyone's been doing so far since the last time that we all spoke. So Andrew, I'm going to start with you, man, since you had to travel 20 some hours via car home on a nonstop drive, right? You and your brother?
That's correct. We did not stop on that drive.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure this was not necessarily the circumstance that you wanted to come home for, or the duration of time that you wanted to be home for. So how are you handling yourself, man?
Well, first off, it feels great to be home. I mean, it's been a while since I've been home before coming home. So like you said, though, it would have been better for a different circumstance where you can actually get out, do certain things with even your family, but friends as well. And then now, I mean, it's great obviously staying home and seeing everyone family-wise, but I mean, you can only get stuck in the house for so long, and it kind of just gets repetitive. But overall, I'm going to start getting a lot more work to do from Oklahoma. They're going to send stuff to me via email. So as far as working from home, I'm going to start a lot more of that tomorrow. And then just besides that, I've been doing schoolwork's kind of keeping me a little busy, but outside of that, I've been reading a lot and then watching a lot of repeat games and doing this podcast here and then some of my other podcasts.
Yeah, man, you are a definitely busy guy. I listen to a few of your other shows, by the way. You're really good. Like, it's It's really impressive that you can keep the amount of interest and conviction and all the things that you say, despite having to probably repeat a lot of it 3, 4, 5 times in a week. I think that's pretty special. The fact that you could do that, man. But last time you were reading a book, it was like a war mystery or of sorts, right? Or a war thriller. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was.
Are you still on that one, or have you moved on to another?
I've actually moved on to I'm on the book 5 of Quarantine already.
That's awesome, man. Why don't you run through some of the titles?
Okay, so I did the first one was Act of War by Brad Thor. That was a good book. That was the one you were just talking about. And then I read Bizarre Bad Dreams by Stephen King. I'm a really big Stephen King. I'm a big Stephen King guy. So that was an interesting, different take because it was a lot of different short stories kind of put into a book. I don't know if any of you have read it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. Just a lot of different outlooks rather than like one long story. Because I think everyone's aware how long of a book Stephen King can write. Between,
yeah, they're daunting.
Under the Dome. But
you could kill a man with Under the Dome.
I was a big fan of Under the Dome. I don't know if any of you guys read it or even seen some of the show, but I thought both of them were pretty good.
Nice.
I read a little bit of it. I wasn't too blown away. I don't really care for Stephen King. He's just kind of there for me. I read a little of Under the Dome, but like I said, I think the fact that it was like a billion pages, I was kind of going back to school. It was one of those things I didn't really have time to keep going with, and I kind of fizzled out. But it had a pretty interesting premise from what I remember.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's what a lot of people I talk to. If you get past the beginning, it definitely picks up, and I think that's how people can get onto it. And then the show's a little different than the book, so I think that helps in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple other books, Sandstorm by James Rollins. I don't know if any of you guys.
Also good.
And so I'm about to start another book by him, Map of Bones. I don't know if you read that.
I have not.
But my dad said it was pretty good. Good follow-up from Sandstorm, so I'm going to give that one a try next.
Nice. Well, that's awesome, man. I'm glad to hear you keeping busy. Your family all doing well? Everyone's okay?
Yeah, everyone's listening to the quarantine very well. My dad's in the medical business a little bit. He doesn't have to deal with any patients, but he's been having to kind of go into work here and there. So he goes into work a few days a week. But besides that, everyone's been staying home, and so far, all good.
All right, well, good, man. I'm glad to hear it. Biscuits, man. So you missed the last show. I don't recall what was going on or why you weren't able to be on, man. But I'm glad you're on tonight. How have you been for the last couple weeks here?
I've been doing I've been doing okay. My office, as I mentioned, I think on the last show, I am a admissions counselor. I'm an admissions counselor, and we are now remote. And I've been kind of doing a little bit more work at night, just keeping up on what I plan to do the next day. We do check-in calls every morning, so try to get some sleep in before I have to get up and do that. I'm a big sleep guy. One thing, that I think has really been helping me get through all of this craziness is just kind of like keeping up with my daily things, like keeping up on sports news, playing the show, watching movies. Doing this podcast, I think, has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise, not only because I enjoy doing it, but because it is something that is refreshing for me. It's always nice talking to you guys. Because I'm not going to lie, like I think I was talking to my boss about this the other day. People are scared, and I'm frankly a little scared too. So just kind of going with how my normal day would usually construct, with work and talking with students and kind of, having the night to talk to you guys when I have the chance. It's been really beneficial for me.
Yeah, that's been the thing that's hitting a lot of us. It's when will normalcy kind of reshape, and then what will normal look like when it does? Because it almost surely will not look the way that we were accustomed to before. So going through these phases and like I said, trying to predict how we're all going to fit in to what this new normal will be. It's terrifying. I think we're always unsure of how to approach the unknown. But it is really good. And that's something that anyone who listens to this show, I would also recommend is I think it's really, really easy to fall into kind of like a depressive or anxious mind state if you're simply just waking up and just staring at Netflix. Finding some bit of routine and taking something normal from we'll call it your previous life right now, pre-corona, and applying it to your day now that you can do safely. So certainly not like going out to the gym. I wouldn't recommend that, but you can work out at home. You can certainly take a walk around the neighborhood, so long as the rest of your neighborhood is not also doing the same thing at the same time. But finding other things to do and give your day purpose is going to really, really help, especially knowing that we're going on 3 additional weeks of this. Rob, you did what I did today, and that's why I saved you for last. I had absolutely no interest in watching this Tiger crap on Netflix, and Stephanie was watching it, and I came downstairs to drink NyQuil because I'm an adult, and I had a massive migraine, and I can't go out to get my medicine right now. So I was like, NyQuil will do. Walked downstairs. She's watching this. Sat down. 6 hours later, couldn't stop. What are you taking? Right? Isn't it? It's so dumb. So here's the thing, and I'm curious to get your take. And I don't know if Biscuits and Andrew, if you guys also watch this.
I have not, Shane.
All right, that's good. Save yourself the stress of watching this. But so anything that you've ever watched documentary style, Making a Murderer is kind of been the comparison at this point. It's another Netflix one. There's a bit of anxiety that naturally progresses, and there's always a couple like minor wow factors, and then like there's that big thing that happens. But everything seems so color by number to me, and this one is no different, at least to this point. I have 2 episodes left, Rob. I don't know what point you're at. But watching those first 5, it felt like absolutely nothing different of any documentary that I've ever seen. I'm like, all right, well, this person's crazy. This person probably did it. This is how this is going. Wow, this person's absolutely fucking out of their mind. And then all of a sudden you're like, why am I 6 episodes in right now? 5 episodes in? What just happened? I don't know how it sucks you in, but it did. Rob, how did it suck you in?
You get sucked in by the craziness of it. You get sucked in by, this guy who's he's a gay drug addict who loves guns and he loves tigers, and he's God. he's batshit crazy. He's trying to put a hit out and kill this woman, and he's paranoid about other people trying to set him up. I mean, this guy, he's the exact kind of person who draws all the attention that these, whatever companies produce these shows would ever want. And that's how people get addicted to this stuff, because, you have the central characters like this guy who are just, their personalities will draw attention to the show. So that's how that happens.
So for you, and you have watched Making a Murderer and the pizza shop bomber or whatever it was, the one that was actually happened locally to us. You watched both of those on Netflix, right?
I actually did not watch the pizza shop bomber, but I've seen various other documentaries, not the one on Netflix, but other like YouTube stuff and whatnot. But I did watch Making a Murderer.
So is Tiger King like induced any different kind of anxiety or stress whilst watching? Because to me, I feel exactly the same as every other documentary. So I don't know if it's just because, hey, this is on right now. This is why it's the greatest thing ever, because we have nothing else to do. Like, I wonder what this would have been like had it been released a year and a half ago when everything was, what we deemed normal. Would it be the kind of hit that it is right now?
No, it wouldn't be. It would still be, I think it would catch on amongst, a certain faction of people, but it wouldn't be as widely watched as it is right now. And same thing with the other one that's kind of big right now, Love is Blind, I think it's called, where it's whatever, like dating game or whatever. That one is catching on the same way that Tiger King is, and same thing there. It definitely would not catch on at the same point, at the same pace, if it was just normal times right now.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. Or if it does catch on, it would catch on with the same audience that it ordinarily would catch on with. It wouldn't necessarily branch out to additional audiences, things like myself. Like, this is not a typical kind of a documentary that I would ever, like I said, I had no intention of watching this. I walked downstairs to get NyQuil, and I saw this mullet on the screen, and I was like, I definitely have to watch this. And I didn't know why.
There it is, right there.
Next thing you know, that's it, man. And that's his sex appeal, is how he says. But yeah, so watch Tiger King. I don't know what to tell you guys. Just watch it. You don't know why you're watching it, but I'm hoping for some ridiculous payoff in episode 6 and 7 at this point to make you feel any differently than what every other documentary has made you feel that you've watched over your life. So, but that's how Rob and I wasted our day today not together, separately in different quarantined homes. Not that I wouldn't enjoy being quarantined with you, Rob. I'm sure that, we could sit there and play MLB The Show or whatever. I am not your first person to be quarantined with. I understand. Taking it back from just a few episodes back. But one thing, like I said, just to reiterate, and this again goes kind of along with both Joe and Andrew's points at this point, finding some purpose to your day. If you're still a student, you do still have purpose. You can work ahead on classwork. You can work a little more thoroughly. Make coffee, go out on your porch, on your step, whatever, like get some fresh air and find some sort of like active purpose throughout each day to break up the monotony of what the next at least month is going to be for us. And it could extend further. And then definitely this is something that, and I know when Stephanie listens to this, she's going to laugh at me or slap me or both. But I have a large Irish Catholic family. Scott's part of it as well. Scott will also probably get slapped by Stephanie when he comes home next. They all jumped on a Zoom call together and had like a Zoom happy hour. And my initial response was, the fuck is wrong with my family? Like, we see each other all the damn time. Like, it's not been that long. Just fucking relax. That really did not make Stephanie happy. Well, now, as this gets extended for another 3 weeks and I start hearing all these different things of people who are unable to go out and see their grandparents who they may be extremely close to because they don't want to put them at risk, for people who had weddings that were planned or people who are having kids, this is terrifying on so many different levels, and it's so unsettling. I was not sensitive to that with my family this week, and I know going forward I certainly will be. So what I would suggest to everyone is reach out to some of your family members so you don't get the opportunity to see during this time, and obviously do it remotely so you're not putting anyone at risk. But you never know how much of an impact that may make on someone else's life and someone else who may be struggling to kind of get through some of this time. Someone who may have fallen into, I'm just going to watch Love is Blind and Tiger King and just kind of succumb to the misery that I've been dealt. Well, you can kind of help that, even just a conversation, a Skype phone call, a Zoom call, anything like that. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, we did a Zoom happy hour for with my coworkers the other day. We had
Good.
like 15 or 20 people in the chat, and it was just going back to what I said about normalcy and, trying to make the best of everything. It was really fun. It was good to see everyone. I like to think our office dynamic is really great. Everyone's, very friendly with one another. There isn't a bad egg in the bunch with them, and it was happy to just see everyone, have a few good laughs. Everyone was asking me how I was coping with no baseball because they know I would literally die for the Phillies. So it was just one of those things. It's, it brought a piece of sanity back, that everyone's still in this together. And I think, that's just another thing I'm taking away with all of this. It's just, ways to get the sanity back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I'm actually writing that down right now as the potential title of this episode. So I do like that. But you did mention, like, we are all at our core, and we wouldn't be doing this podcast if we were not, baseball diehards. Like, we're all ballpark rats at this point. If there was anywhere that we would like to be in this moment, on March 29th, it would be Citizens Bank Park. And it's surreal that we are at this point and there is not baseball, and we do not know when it may or may not happen again. And if it does, what kind of a season will we be looking at? What changes are going to be made? What kind of accommodations to get this thing through? For people who have been listening to 94.1 or 97.5, one, I would stop and start immediately listening to all of our backlog podcasts, because those stations suck.
Yeah, we're so much better.
Especially without sports. Like, these guys, like, we have different dynamics to our lives, like all of us, and there's something beyond this, but their job is sports. Their world is sports. They have nothing else to contribute to life or society, or so it seems. Either that, or really just can't stand the tone of certain people's voices. That might be the thing, or the arrogance to some of their voices. But nevertheless, we do still talk baseball here. We still talk life. We talk, how this pandemic's affecting us and everything like that. But do yourselves a favor, skip some of their day shows and midday shows and evening shows and just throw on an AMYP podcast, any of them. Tommy just put on another show. Rob has Disciples of Ed that we'll eventually get back into a little bit. Whiskey Ramble we'll put back out. maybe even Andrew and I and Scott will get a TJ as one of us out there, because at this point, why not? Like, we got nothing else going on, right? We have nothing else going on. But yeah, take a listen to any of our backlog podcasts at this point instead of listening to those. But one thing that I did take from their shows while I was listening in and out on the radio was the amount of calls of people that were calling for change to baseball just in general. So like we'll get to the way this season may play out and some implications that may happen as a result of all of this. But I'm curious to get everyone's kind of stance on all things baseball, all things. Some people were calling in saying they wanted the mound lower because people are throwing too hard now. Some people wanted to reduce the extreme levels that the shift could be out there. Other people were calling in wanting to make manipulations to the DH rule, to the roster limits, to all these different things. And for once in my life, I have agreed with Mike Missinelli, which I ordinarily do not. Baseball is not for people who can't accept the purity of this game, and this game is still a thinking game, and it's about exploiting advantages. And everything that we hate is, so many people hate that there's three true outcomes, right? You're walking, you're striking out, you're hitting a home run. That's basically all this game has to offer right now. But it's all it has to offer because we haven't adapted offensively to play with that shift. We see it occasionally, but not all the time. So let's talk now. If you could make different changes to this game, are you one of the people that says, yeah, we could improve things? Or are you more of a traditionalist and you want to let this game play out naturally as it does? Rob, I'm going to start with you because we've talked about this before a little bit.
Well, my thing is, I don't really know how I would go about this, but however it would happen, I want baseball to go back to what it was before, when it wasn't a three true outcomes game, when you had guys throughout the lineups who weren't home run hitters but could hit, the doubles, the triples, even the singles, when you had pitchers who could rely on off-speed stuff and breaking pitches as opposed to just blowing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs past everyone. To me, baseball, and I'm an admitted big fan of the home run ball. I love watching home runs fly out of the ballpark, but I think the fact that it's become a three true outcomes game, and you see these little guys like the Freddie Galvises of the world going out there and hitting 25 home runs, that kind of devalues the home run to me a little bit. So I want whatever needs to happen. I want baseball to kind of take a step back and be a little bit more well-rounded, at least from an offensive standpoint. The power hitters hitting home runs, but then the little guys, providing the speed on the base pass, getting stolen bases, and, station-to-station baseball. I want basically to go back to what it was when the Phillies were dominating. And I think you could do a couple things, maybe take away the shifts, or at least put a rule in effect where there needs to be two infielders on each side of second base. You could maybe try lowering the mound a little bit so that pitchers can't be as reliant on velocity. That's another thought right there. Other than that, I can't really come up with anything off the top of my head. I just want to see it go back to what it was when it wasn't a three true outcomes game.
Well, I hate everything you just said. Not everything. I shouldn't say that. Like 97% of it. I would love more balls in play, as we all would. But I would say that there's a natural, this is my counter to those points and people who have that. And Rob, you're not alone. A lot of people have called in with similar recommendations, similar arguments. But my consistent argument or counter to that argument is baseball and sports in general. It's always been a game of adjustments. So there's going to be a lull. There's going to be a period of time where they do have to figure out what is the best way to beat 101 mile an hour fastball up in the zone. Like what is the way to beat the shift? How can we still do this but not reduce the percentage and probability likelihood of runs crossing home plate? That there's going to be a time where things flip again, and that the offensive has figured out a way to beat that pitching style, and then they've figured out how to beat this shift, and then they're going to force these defenses to play a little more straight up. Then it's going to be back in the defenses and the pitchers' hands, and how you game plan for different pitchers and how you game plan for different defensive setups. It's all about that adjustment. Right now, we're just in that period of time where defensively, they kind of have the upper hand. Pitchers, they have the upper hand. Hitters will eventually figure this out. Right now, the way that they've figured it out is we hope to God 3, 4, 5 times a night we can beat you with a long ball, but we're probably not stringing together a ton of hits. But it's for right now, this is the risk we're willing to take. Now, is there going to be a time where some of the guys who are seeing kind of a severe shift that don't really deserve it, they're going to start dropping bunts down the line and then taking doubles and just saying, yeah, I'm just going to take this all day. But then you need some of these guys behind them to come through with solid contact. You need the Gene Seguras of the world to slap you 310, 320 batting average of a bunch of, Pudge Rodriguez lofted doubles over the second baseman or lofted singles over the second baseman's head and cross those runs across the plate. To this point, most offenses don't seem to be quite confident in that approach, so they continue to just pound this launch angle movement, which for right now is partially working, but again, we still see all these adjustments. Biscuits, you're a baseball guy through and through. What are your thoughts? Are you a purist, or what, if anything, would you be changing to this game?
I'm kind of with you. Baseball's always been a game of adapting, and as you said, like, things will eventually adapt, and they might revert back to the traditional ways when it wasn't the three-way, you're out, you walk, or you hit a home run. But I am kind of a purist, I think. I don't think baseball is boring. People might think it's long, but I like it when the games are long because I just love watching it. Sure, you could consider like pitch clocks ways to speed up the game, but I don't care about any of that stuff. I really don't. I could watch a 4-hour baseball game and, not have a single qualm about it. I'm a big offense guy.
Vince Velasquez.
I honestly, I don't care. Sure, he takes a minute to pitch, but I'd rather him, take his time than choke, but he chokes anyway.
That's the thing. But I get your point. I get your stance.
I just like watching it. My biggest change was I want the DH in the National League. I know that is not a popular opinion on the show.
It is not.
But I love offense. I think it makes for more, you don't just got to free out with pitchers, even though nowadays pitchers can rake in some aspects. But yeah, that's all I really got. DH in the National League, I'd love it.
You mentioned the potential of a pitch clock. There were other calls of people saying, why are we wasting time with catchers, putting down 14 signals, when there's a guy on second base out there? Why have they not figured out a way to use, Astro technology to deliver pitches from catcher to pitcher? I hate that idea. This is where, like, the traditionalist of me, like, I hate instant replay. I would so much rather be able to show up at the ballpark and know that there is a baseball bat and gloves out there, and like that's fucking it. That's all you need. Like, you don't need all of these, instant replay cameras. You don't need all these technological advances. I don't need to see the strike chart at home plate on StatCast. I don't need to see the launch angle or trajectory of baseballs right now. I think that's all information that I would want as a player, but as a fan to just watch this game, I find that to be distracting, and I find that to be something that is overwhelming for dumb people. It's just, to put that plainly, I do think people look at that information and they just get overwhelmed. I wouldn't say I'm overwhelmed by that information, but it's distracting, and it becomes irritating, to Rob's point, where little guys are out there swinging for the fences that of. Like, could you imagine like Juan Pierre playing baseball right now still?
Oh my God, man. Ben Revere.
Right. Oh God. Chicken click, Ben.
Oh God. Ben Revere sucked.
He did.
I was actually at the game where he hit his first home run.
Were you?
That's awesome.
I was
he got
talking
through like 1,300 at bats before he hit one. He's absurd.
My friend and I, all right, so quick story. I'm sorry to get off topic here,
go ahead.
but my friend and I, we bought tickets to the game last minute because it was supposed to rain a little bit. So we went down to the stadium. We waited until right before the game was scheduled to start. We got upper deck seats for $5. No intention of actually going to the upper deck. We never even thought about it. We literally went right down third base line, sat next to the ball girl. We're chatting her up the whole night. And so my buddy and I were talking to the ball girl, and the Phillies were at bat, and nobody was paying attention to the game. They were losing like 5-0 to Colorado or something like that. And I turn and face the game, and I see the ball, carrying over the right field fence. I was thinking, okay, cool, we hit a home run. And I was like, wait a minute, who just hit that home run? And my buddy was like, was that fucking Ben Revere that just hit a home run? Like, holy shit. So yeah, that's my story of seeing Ben Revere's first career home run in person.
The awkwardness of that story and the like non-emotion that just like that really fucking happened. I imagine exactly how that story actually played out. So yeah, more or less a baseball purist over there with Biscuit. There are certainly things that could be done to improve the speed of the game that wouldn't make too much of a change. And I wouldn't be opposed to a lot of it. It wouldn't be something I would suggest. But Andrew, you are another one who is at this point, we're about ready to start sending therapists over to check on you daily just to make sure.
I appreciate that.
No problem, man. But from your standpoint, what, if any, changes would you like in the game of baseball?
So I'm more of a traditionalist when it comes to baseball. I like the way it is. I think the way that there shouldn't be a DH. If they're going to go to the same for both, there should be no DH. Because I know this is a rare take, but don't get me wrong, I love my 11 to 10 games, but I'd rather watch a 2-1, 1-0 game, a nice back and forth pitcher's duel where you don't know when which run can really win the game, rather than just seeing 10 different home runs throughout the entire game, and it's more like, when's the next one going to come? So I'd rather keep the game the way it is. But in terms of obviously I'd like to see a lot of more hits in play rather than home runs as well. And I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to more blame the way that the owners or GMs and managers are kind of building their roster nowadays, because they all the teams that would try to get the 300 average guys and the guys that can steal and play small ball in this new game would all be the guys that would get a team that wouldn't fit those guys. Like, I was a Ben Revere fan, so maybe I'm just trying to defend him, but for a guy that hit over...
Damn it.
For a guy that hit over like 300
Someone was going to be a Ben Revere fan.
I'm just saying, though, like, if he got on and you say you put him, instead of having Tommy Joseph or whoever the first baseman was at the time hitting behind him, if he would have got on and say you're bringing up a guy like Chris Bryant or Anthony Rizzo, they're going to hit him in every time, because a double in the gap is going to score a guy with that speed. So I blame more the way that the rosters are constructed nowadays than anything, as well as I blame the Astros, because if it wasn't for their cheating scandal and the way they kind of use those signs to get those extra home runs, if you look at the more recent non-Astros teams to win the World Series, you're looking at like the Kansas City Royals in 2015, who their leading home run guy was Mike Moustakas, who only had 22. So they built a more of a completed team. And then the Cubs had Chris Bryant and Rizzo, but besides them, you're then looking at Addison Russell. So to me, again, it's more the Astros are kind of changed the game these last few years with the way they kind of brought out that. So now teams kind of feel the way that they need to stay in games by hitting the home run. So I'd say just keep the game the way it is. Hopefully the cheating scandal kind of changes things to kind of get that more complete roster back.
I'm so pro throwing all the shade at the Astros for everything. Like, I think that,
Astros.
like, at least, right, for like at least the next 20 to 25 years, if something goes wrong in baseball, it's the fucking Astros' fault. 110%.
I was going to say the rest of my life, but I doubt I'll survive another 20 to 25 years. So,
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, this coronavirus, none of us might. But
hey, I just wanted to make one quick comment. I think a lot
Go ahead.
of teams are also responsible for the current state of the game, because look at how many teams have modified their ballparks to be more conducive to home runs.
Oh,
The Mets
I don't care about that.
up at Citi Field moved the fences in. The Marlins down in Miami moved the fences in. Petco Park, they moved the fences in. So like that stuff is all conducive to the way the game is right now with more home runs. Is teams trying to I think they're trying to put more fans in the seats because they know that fans love the home run ball, but they're making their stadiums all bandboxes pretty much now.
Well, that was the response to the way the home run balls were increasing each year. when you look at the smaller, newer built kind of ballparks, and I don't remember if it was Biscuits who brought it up last time or not, but Citizens Bank Park being kind of that one of those first ballparks to be built with the straightened alleyways as opposed to the curved off ones, or rounded out ones, I should say. It allowed for more gap to gap, ordinary like double power to be turned into home run power. And then when this launch angle movement came, and when the amount of home runs that were happening or deep fly balls that were happening, it didn't necessarily take the best of athletes in the world to catch up to anything in these gaps when you had an extra 15 feet in each, that you wouldn't ordinarily have in today's baseball in some of the parks that you mentioned, Rob, that you wouldn't necessarily have to make a play on a baseball. Now you can throw out a 33-year-old Andrew McCutchen on one leg, and he's going to get to anything in left center field. And if he doesn't, it's because it's a fucking home run. Whereas if this was, I'm trying to think of, like if this was like Safeco Park, it's fucking different. Like Andrew McCutchen very well may not get to that ball, and it might be a triple. So it's just, again, I guess making your point, Rob, yes, like owners who have made the decision to say, this is kind of what we need to do, added to, I don't know where I was going with the argument when I started this. Now that I think about it. Well, that's fucked. I agree with you, Rob. I think that's the stance I'm taking. Just a really long roundabout way to do so. Fuck. I feel like there was a different point in there, and it's going to happen right in the middle of the show where I'm going to remember it, and it's going to fuck everything up. But if it happens,
coronavirus is fucking with our minds too. Apparently,
no. Tiger King is. I lost brain cells today. That's the goddamn problem. But all right. So real quick before we get into Andrew's bracket, which I'm super excited about. Which, by the way, kudos to you, man. That was awesome. I think it wasn't even your idea on the last show, and you were like, I'm going to take the reins on this, and you built us a bracket of 64, which I'm definitely excited for, and we'll share it on the ANYP Twitter account. I'll have to get in contact with Sean if he hasn't already sent it out there. But the last thing I want to talk about on kind of changes to the game of baseball would be specific changes and implications that the coronavirus has had for or could have on this season, or will have on this season, I suppose. The idea of playing baseball into December at neutral sites and playing without fans are two things that have been thrown out there. Baseball 100% is going to want to get in as many games as they can for money purposes. They're going to want to do what they can to fulfill as many of the 162 regular season games as possible. I'm kind of the opinion I would rather play a far shortened season and make it that real sprint to the playoffs, because for us, we've talked about it before, shortened season plays in the Philadelphia Phillies' hands. We get Andrew McCutchen back from day one. Spencer Howard probably plays. Alec Boehm probably plays. We see how that goes. So it does play for the Philadelphia Phillies. Jake Arrieta gets healthy. For other teams, who's laughing at the Arrieta comment?
Me. Jake Arrieta is never going to be healthy.
I love it.
I hope he doesn't dent my skull for saying that.
With what? An 86 mile an hour fastball? You're fine.
If that.
Yeah, right. Bone spur Jake, or bone spurless Jake now, I guess. But so let's see. So like I said, I'm of the opinion I'd rather take all precaution necessary. And if you can't play with fans, you can't play with fans. It is what it is. But I want baseball on TV. I want these guys out there playing as soon as it is safely possible to do so. And I would rather them do that and not put the strain of 120 games in 125 nights. I don't think that's safe. I would rather it be, hey, let's play 85 games in 115 nights, something like that. Whatever it may be, but work backwards this time. I'm going to start with Andrew here. What kind of things would you be most okay with, and what things would you like to not see happen for Major League Baseball for the 2020 season?
I really hope they realize that they won't get most of the season in. I'm afraid of, by the way they're talking, that they don't realize it yet, and they're going to do their best to get all of them in. But I don't think that's. I think most people don't think it's possible, but we'll see how it plays out. I guess it really all depends on when you're able to get the season started. first off, I'd say I'd really consider. I think I forget who it might have been the league that mentioned it, but I think at this point, assuming you don't start till late May, early June, I think you kind of get rid of the All-Star game mid-season, and if you want to play it, you can kind of do all that stuff kind of after the season happens, kind of like the NFL does with the Pro Bowl and everything, just so you can get more games into July rather than giving a week off in that sense. You can get some games in that way. I think that'd be the best bet for that sense. And then I don't think, again, you can't make all of them up. If you're going to try to, I get trying to do some doubleheaders. Definitely don't do a bunch of 9-inning doubleheaders. Working in athletics in Division II, they, instead of having a 3-game series every weekend, they do 1 game on Friday, and then they do 2 games on Saturday. I'm not saying do that, but I'm just saying if you're going to do doubleheaders, the way they do their doubleheaders is they do 1 7-inning game and then 1 9-inning game. So I think that's a road you can go down, where you can maybe not do 2 9-inning games and just do a 7 and 9. That way you save some pitchers. I don't know what you guys think about that idea.
I hate that. Minor League Baseball does that. So if you go to like an Iron Pigs game for a doubleheader, you're getting 2 7-inning games. I don't like taking those final 2, at bats, 2 innings away. It's just weird to me. Like I'm not 16 anymore. I'm not playing in high school baseball. So yeah, that's not really my thing. I get health-wise why it may make sense. But I would personally not like to see that happen.
And I agree. I would prefer not to have it, but I think if they're really going to try to get all the games in, I think that's just the road that they might have to go down. I also heard 2 and 2 7-inning games, which I would absolutely hate. I would definitely not try that. I think you'd at least have to do 1 9-inning game. But I think that's something to think about. I also think I don't think you can go into December. I think that's just too much. I think it'd be better to just keep it the way it is. Like you said, you start later and then you just kind of make a quicker push to the postseason, and then you just get the postseason going. Maybe obviously a little later if you have to, but not too much. And then I think the last thing is, I think one thing I wanted to mention was I think it's interesting how all this happens after Manfred makes all those rule changes, where now everything's kind of going to have to get changed all over. Where he does the shortened or the one extra player on the team, and then the 3-batter minimum, and now it's kind of all getting messed up. And I just thought that was kind of funny how it kind of worked out like that, because a lot of people disagree with those rules, and now a lot of it's just got to get changed.
That is mildly amusing. I will own that. All right, Biscuits. So I have a question. This is something I actually loved as a player. I loved like neutral site tournaments where you would show up and you would be there for 2 weeks, and you may play 8 different teams in those 2 weeks, but you're playing at one thing and you're just kind of chilling in the hotel doing whatever you want. How would you be opposed if Major League Baseball found like 3 like highly unlikely with like the least statistical possibility of the coronavirus in that particular area? You set up 12 teams out that way, and they basically just played like high school travel AAU baseball. And they just played in an empty stadium and then just rotated clubhouses, just in and out, quick, rake of the field, same way shit still goes on where I play. How would you feel if Major League Baseball went that kind of approach?
I mean, I'm not crazy about the idea, but I think the bottom line is I'd rather, as you said earlier, I want to see baseball on my TV at some point this year. I saw a tweet earlier today that said they're planning on trying to start the season around June. I think that would leave, about maybe 100 games, 120 games maybe, around that kind of number, which I think that would be great. I don't think we'll get that many games in. I think we will get around 80 games, 85 games, as you said earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys are a little closer to Philadelphia than I am, but aren't all gatherings of more than 50 people banned at any point, like any place in Philadelphia for like the next 6 months?
Philadelphia, there's not going to be. It's not 6, but there will not be fans in Citizens Bank Park this season. Like that to me seems so unlikely. Which to me, if it's that unlikely, why bring traveling teams into this city if it's a hot spot? So close to New York, that is also an incredible hot spot. Like why not why not take the extra precaution and send these guys, even to a college university somewhere and let them play somewhere out there on one of those fields? Like, who cares? Just find a location. But yeah, I don't believe that very many, especially hotspot cities like ours, are going to see fans in the stadium anyway. So why would you risk bringing in additional people as well?
Yeah, that's why I think neutral sites are really the best option. Obviously, that's something they were talking a lot about. If they do decide to extend the season and play more games and extend the season into like November or December, that they're going to use a lot of like neutral sites, a lot of stadiums down south. Somebody, I think it was John Heyman, tweeted, we could see a World Series at the Marlins Park this year or something like that. I also saw about, expanding the rosters a little bit. Right now it's, the 26-man roster, maybe bumping that number up to like 28 or 30. I also saw weekly double headers. I agree with Andrew's point, though. I think they're really going to, overwork these guys. These guys aren't going to be able to, be adequately, oh my God, if I could talk today, adequately prep for games. I think you're going to see a lot of injuries. But as I'm sure you guys are seeing with the beat reporters, there's really nothing off the table at this point. I just think this is such a fluid situation that, like, we don't know.
Oh, Biscuits,
we don't know.
I love you.
We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way to know how this is really all going to play out. And you can't, try to form some kind of plan to combat something that you don't know, how it's going to be next week or the week after. We could be, in quarantine for like another month or two, potentially prolonging the season even more to the point where it would almost seem like foolish to even think we're going to have baseball this year. I don't know. I hope it doesn't get to that case, but it's such a ongoing process that there's really no end in sight. So you really can't form any solidified plan on how you're going to go about this. And that's why I think everything's on the table. They're thinking of, if this ends next month, like, what's our plan then? If it ends in like 2 months, how are we going to go from there? So I think that's why you're seeing literally every option or every change or any kind of like, rule difference kind of thrown into the mix, because there's just no consistency with any of this situation.
Yeah, and that's the terrifying thing. And Biscuits, I had a minor freak out there while you were speaking, specifically because you used the correct term, and I work for a human who does not know the difference between fluid and fluent. And I've been cringing constantly on my work computer and conference calls and things like that every time this guy speaks. So thank you for being a human who knows the English language. That means a lot to me, more than you know.
How does someone not know the difference between fluid and fluent? I mean,
I don't know, and he's got to like
completely
triple my
different
salary.
things.
It's hilarious.
Might be a mental thing. He just says fluent.
I don't know. Sometimes.
I mean, it's stupid. It's fluid.
For what it's worth, George Bush was the president of the United States, and he couldn't say nuclear.
Is that the president you want to talk about right now? For stupidity? Just curious. But anyway, we're not going to go political. Or not overly political, because I'm sure we'll get into stuff randomly on some of these shows. But Rob, for you, man, you're a guy who has covered teams, down in the locker rooms. You're a previous Flyers reporter down there. You've seen the way that locker rooms are. You've seen the way that teams play into the crowd from that kind of a standpoint. And you see how much of a difference that makes for, like I said, you cover the Flyers. So, when they're playing in a quiet Wells Fargo Center, you've undoubtedly responded or asked questions. Is it difficult to play at home when it's no longer an advantage versus when it is? If the 76ers, Andrew, for our podcast, TJ is one of us, if they were playing without a fan base, they'd probably never win a basketball game again.
That's accurate.
It's right. So, like, Rob, for you, how much do you think that would play into a team like this Philadelphia Phillies team, who really did play a lot into the crowd at CBP, namely Bryce Harper? He's a very animated player. But there are several guys, Andrew McCutcheon's another one, who play very much so to the crowd. How do you think that it may impact this game, knowing that there's the likelihood of fans being in these stadiums is slim to none at this point for the 2020 season?
Well, it's already playing into it a little bit. I'm looking it up. I'm trying to find a tweet right now, but there's an agreement that the players came to with the MLB a few days ago in which they specifically stated, actually, I found it's a Jeff Passan tweet, and I'm going to read it verbatim. The players in the league agreed the 2020 MLB season won't begin until, and one of the criteria is there are no bans on mass gatherings that limit the ability to play in front of fans. The other ones are there are no travel restrictions, and medical experts determine games will not pose a risk to the health of teams and fans. So that right there, the players want to play in front of fans. So I think if that holds up, that basically rules out neutral site games or empty stadiums. And with that being the case, we might be limited to, you guys mentioned 80 games. It might even go lower than that, which is less than half a season. So it would really be a pennant race from opening day. But yes, it's going to be really interesting. And if the players are going to hold to that, we could very well see the whole entire season just canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Would you guys, whoever was speaking, go ahead.
Nah, you can go ahead.
So I was going to say, would you guys be more now, us as fans, like we have to set this aside for a moment. But if you were a player, if you were someone in a front office, if you were someone, affiliated with Major League Baseball in some capacity, would you sooner rather say, all right, you know what, like this 2020 season, this just isn't happening right now? Or, hey, we have 2 months. We're going to throw, like a 45 game season out there, basically tournament style, and almost everybody makes the playoff, and we just dwindle this thing down. Like what would you guys rather see if you were affiliated with baseball, not just a fan? Like as fans, I think a round robin crazy tournament might be one of the most insane experiences ever. And I would be into it specifically because I'd have to see how crazy shit got for one season alone. But from a baseball standpoint, what do you think is the fewest games that they would allow this season to go to and still play it? And if they did, could you see it being specifically just basically a round robin playoff tournament? How do you guys see this playing out? Andrew, I'll start with you.
I think in that sense, if you got down to around 60 to 62 games, I think that's when you start thinking about the round robin type tournament stuff. And I think it'd be for the players themselves. I think they'd rather. I think at first they would hate that, obviously, because one game and they could be done or whatever they were going to end up doing. But I think in terms of playing, I think they'd rather do that if it meant that or a complete cancellation of the season. I think specifically certain players who are on a 1-year deal left and they're trying to make a name for themselves going into another contract. I think they definitely want those games up. And I think, all the other guys as well, I think they'd rather just get out there and play eventually. I think so. I think from the player standpoint, I think they'd obviously rather try to avoid a round robin type playoff thing. But like you said, for the fans, that'd be crazy to watch. If you're doing a March Madness type style game and the Marlins beat whoever on a one game, and then they end up advancing, they'd end up beating us. But that'd be crazy to see because baseball's a sport where anything can really happen on any given day, and who knows who would be able to advance that far. So as a fan, I think it'd be absolutely insane. But from a baseball reporter and player perspective, I think they'd try to avoid that at all cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would agree with, and your point is excellent. It's something we haven't really talked about too much on this one. We'll talk about it on another show. These guys who are on the last year of a contract, teams who have just acquired, major assets who have 1 year left on their contract, do they want a shortened season with that player? Or do they want the full 162? What is in the best interest of that individual player? What is in the best interest of the acquiring organization? How does Major League Baseball handle that? If it's a partial season, what are the implications that may come from a partial season? Does that not count against a year? Like what goes on at this point? So that's all definitely stuff that we can talk about. And I think that's a good topic, Andrew. So I wrote this one down here while you were talking, and we'll talk about that in a future show here at PTBNL. But before we transition into Andrew's bracket here, does anyone else have any final thoughts on any potential changes or implications of the 2020 season?
I just want to say if I'm the MLB, If they're rolling with, a 60, maybe 70 game season, I think they pretty much just go as normal and have that 60 or 70 games just be, like I said before, a pennant race right until the end, and then you have the playoffs go on as normal. I think the MLB
it's hard though. Like, how do you build a schedule?
Mm-hmm.
I think I was going to get into that as well. I think maybe you cut out interleague play. You shorten series down to 2 games as opposed to 3 or 4. You have Sunday day night doubleheaders like they used to do. So those are just 3 things right there off the top of my head that they could do. And then, as I said, without interleague play, you can focus more, and having the 2-game series, you can focus more on having each team, play an equal amount of in-division games and then an equal amount of the games against the 2 divisions in their league, the 2 other divisions. So, that's just off the top of my head. That's one way that baseball could even out the schedule in a abbreviated season.
Yeah, some of those points are very realistic. We could see that happen. I don't know the likelihood that they would force travel on, such quick turnarounds as to play just 2-game series. I don't know that they would risk travel on, day night doubleheaders on Sunday, but I do think that there's a way that they could make that schedule work where maybe, you were just in Philadelphia, New York, and DC for, 3 straight series. So say 7 nights, where the travel was fairly limited.
And then have extended homestands as well.
Right. So there is a way they could make it work. I just think it'd be really, really fucking hard. But yeah, so go ahead, man.
I was going to ask, it just came to my head when you guys were talking about the abbreviated schedule and stuff. And like you said, the travel would be difficult, but I never really put together, if you think about it, like NBA and NHL, they only play 1 game and then they travel to somewhere else. What if I know put more travel on the teams, but what if they kind of did something like that where you might take out a full series and then take out maybe some division games, but instead of taking out interleague play, maybe you go around and play every team maybe once or twice and like do something on that end.
In theory, I would be open to that. However, baseball is a game of series. Like there's, it's, you build, so much of your philosophy is how you stack up in a 3-game series against someone during the regular season or a 5 to 7 game series in the postseason. I think taking that dynamic out of it and making it essentially every game's a wild card game. Every game you're playing this team 1 time, and then you have to think about another team and another roster and another game plan immediately versus, hey, we know what we want to execute for the next 3 to 4 nights. Then we worry about what we need to worry about going into the next one. So I think that's a little hard to do. Like even college series, for the most part, correct me if I'm wrong, they're series. You're playing a team 2 or 3 times. So I don't know that that's a realistic possibility in baseball, so much so as it would be for like the NBA or the NHL.
Yeah, so that's a fair point, just because it's a lot more strategy than other sports.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the possibility of, if the season does get shortened to, 60, 70, 80 games, only playing division opponents?
I hate that, specifically because there are certain divisions that are going to kick the shit out of each other, and they should have 3 teams come out of it. Like if you could work it in a way that you would totally fuck with the playoff dynamic for this year and this year only, where you're like, listen, if you're going to beat the hell out of each other, like you may have 3 teams that deserve to be in the postseason, where you got to find a way that those 3 teams get in, and another dog shit division out there that is playing with just next to no talent, they don't get 2 teams in. They don't get, like, it would just be a hard thing to manage. So I don't know the realistic possibility of that. I would sooner say if you bagged interleague play, you played, if you could get a 3-game series in with all your divisional teams, or 4 3-game series in with all your divisional teams, and then 2 series with the other 2 divisions in your league. Then just take the top 6 teams at the end of that without, like, it doesn't, even if one of those divisions don't net a playoff team. Like for this year and this year only, if you need to reseed that way, I'm for it. Like that's something they could entertain. I don't know that anybody would really go for that in baseball, since you build your roster to kind of withstand your division first and then withstand a playoff run second. So I don't know. This thing is so very fluid, not fluent, boss, hopeful listener of the pod. But that we could see this thing, change by the day, and new theories and new possibilities coming out by the day. So I'm sure this will be a topic that we kind of hit on at this point, at the front end of almost every pod that we do, and until baseball's back. But let's roll into Andrew's bracket. So Andrew made us a field of 64 of the best 64 Philadelphia Phillies or names that he had come up with. And I geeked out over it a lot. I filled out like 6 of them just to like make sure that I was thoroughly confident in my Final Fours. And I am. I'm pretty confident in my Final Fours. So I am definitely curious, since we are already over the hour point, we're not going to go through matchup by matchup. I figured we would kind of go through each other's Final Fours, and then eventual, who is your all-time favorite Philly. And undoubtedly there's going to be a story or some reason as to why. And I hope that it's something more than they're a good baseball player. That that was the reason that you went with the name that you went with. So let's start in that first upper left quadrant now. Just to give perspective for some of you guys, the number 1 seed in this one was Mike Schmidt. So Andrew, you created the bracket. Out of that first field of 16, who did you have reaching the Final Four?
Okay, so I was a little biased with who I liked over best talent. Obviously, I think Mike Schmidt would be the best player. But I went with a workhorse that we always heard a bunch of stories with, and I loved when he came here. And I went with Roy Halladay just because, I looked up to him a lot with how much, how he always went out there, always had a lot of complete games, went out and did his business every 5th day. And I loved hearing him talk, and just a lot of stories. And when he passed away and everything, I don't know, it just kind of hit hard in a different way. And and I love listening to the stories of when they and the ceremony they had for him after everything happened, and you just heard all the different stories of how good he was, how much of a great teammate. I think that just went a long way. So I had him going to the Final Four in this one.
Yeah, I respect that a lot. He went far in most of the brackets that I had as well. Biscuits, for you, sir, who did you have in that first quadrant of 16 going to your Final Four?
I had Doc too.
Okay.
Very similar to Andrew. I love Doc Halladay. He was one of those, when he came to Philadelphia, I was like, we're going to win another 3 World Series. He's the man. He's going to lead us to the promised land. And it looked like he was going to. It really did look like he was going to. I have a little anecdote when right before Halladay passed away, I had a few bobbleheads, and I had his, I believe it was his retirement bobblehead. And I was picking which bobblehead I wanted to bring back to school. I had a Cole Hamels one, a Chase Utley one, and a Roy Halladay one. And I chose my Halladay one. I thought real hard about it. I was like, Halladay's the man. He meant so much to me. Watching him pitch was some of the best, baseball I have ever seen. And a week later, he died. And I was, it was kind of I don't want to use the word symbolic, but I was I made the right choice. I'm happy I had the GOAT on my little podium at my desk in my dorm room. He's great. He was absolutely amazing. And I love the fact that NBC's been showing the perfect game, the no-hitter, because I could watch that and have a smile across my face all day. I still get excited. I still get chills. My girlfriend was like, what's going to happen? Why are you so excited? And I'm just like, it's beautiful. It's true. Andrew mentioned earlier, screw watching an 11-10 blowout game. It's those pitching duels, and Halladay was just a beast. I remember I went to a couple games, I think in 2010, where he just pitched 8 innings, no runs, so many strikeouts. He was just dominant every time, and you couldn't get enough of that. So that's why I chose Doc.
I dig that story, man. The bobblehead piece there, and it is weird. I do feel like we, kind of draw some symbolism from a lot of those different things as the reasons why we subconsciously went with the things that we went with, or consciously in your case chose. But that's definitely a cool story. And yeah, Doc, so I don't know about you guys, but I geek out over asterisk events, as I call them. I don't. I'm weird about that. I don't like saying the words. Obviously, right now I don't care about perfect game no hitter. It is what it is. But during the process, I'm super against it. But like anytime someone talks about it, like I already have it geared up now on my YouTube queue to watch, is like final outs of no hitters or the condensed versions of games of no hitters. And like I remember one night at my old job that I went through and I must have watched Halliday's playoff no hitter like 6 times on condensed, and I swear to God, every single time that ball rolls up the barrel of Phillips' bat, I sit there and start tearing up every time. It like didn't matter, and I watch it back to back to back. So you guys went with 2 quality choices there, for Doc Halladay coming out of that first bracket. Rob, you got anything different for us?
I'm making it 3 for 3, and I just wanted to say, even though he wasn't here for that long in Philadelphia, I mean, the first 2 seasons, 2010, 2011. First of all, 2010 was, you could say it was one of the greatest achievements for any pitcher of all time. The fact that he went 21-10, he had a 2.44 ERA, 9 complete games, 4 of them shutouts.
Oh my God.
And not only that, the only pitcher ever to have a perfect game in the regular season and then another no-hitter in the playoffs. Only pitcher ever to throw a perfect game and another no-hitter in the same season. And he won the Cy Young that year, which is very well deserved. And he was just as good, if not better, the next season. He went 19-6 at a 2.35 ERA. So he was so dominant for those 2 seasons. He fell off a little bit after that, and he wasn't as good as last 2 years here. But just those 2 seasons alone, I mean, as I said, that 2010 season was truly remarkable with the feats that he was able to pull off. And it's such a shame that we weren't able to get him his World Series ring. But Doc Halladay, my Final Four representative from that bracket.
Yeah, you definitely cannot go wrong with Doc out of this bracket. He was the 3rd seed in this one? Is that right?
Yeah.
3rd seed. We had him. So I went with an upset in this one, and I went with one that I figured no one else was going to go with. But purely for me, this was like this sign of transition to, hey, we are going to be a big market city. We're here. We're ready to go. I went with Jim Thome out of the first one. Another
choice.
One, not a long tenure as a Philly, did come back, but always speaks incredibly highly of his time here, speaks incredibly highly of Charlie Manuel, who also speaks incredibly highly of Jim Thome, both of them obviously Cleveland Indians at points as well. But when we acquired him and he chose to come here, it did symbolize that, hey, you know what, we have a young core that we know is going to be ready in the coming years. We're drafting decently right now, and we believe in the direction of this baseball team. Let's gear up for it. Let's go. Let's put some asses in some seats. And he helped bring in Citizens Bank Park for us. And to me, he kind of ushered in what was the greatest era of Philadelphia Phillies baseball in my lifetime, and certainly in yours as well, I assume. So for me, I went with Jim Thome out of that first bracket.
I love that one. It's a good pick.
Very valid, very valid. You've talked about this before on a couple of shows, but definitely a very valid reason there. He was a big part of really ringing in not just the new era, but ringing in Citizens Bank Park, when they were in their last season at the Vet and then moving into Citizens Bank Park. He was a big part of, kind of like what the Vegas Raiders are doing right now, trying to bring in some big names to sell themselves with a new city. The Phillies are trying to sell themselves with a new stadium and bringing in a big name there. And Thome was that guy.
Touring him around the city, touring him around the construction site. It was special, man. And it was that, again, moment of transition of, we're here, we're ready to play some competitive baseball now.
I also think his 400th home run, I think that is one of Harry Callis's best calls.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that today.
Did you?
I did, yep.
I also fall on these YouTube, just rabbit holes of I just can't stop. But definitely a quality call. So let's move into the bottom left bracket here. The 1 seed in this one for reference is Robin Roberts. A couple notable names in this one is I love how Robin Roberts is up against Jose Mesa. Fuck Jose Mesa. But there's Chase Utley, Brett Myers, Kurt Schilling, Billy Wagner, Shane Victorino. A lot of good names in this one. So work the opposite way with this time. We'll start with Rob. Rob, who did you take out of this one? I feel like most of us are probably taking the same guy.
All right, well, before I get into who I took, I'm going to go into a quick little note because you brought up Jose Mesa. I saw him pitch twice in my life when during his tenure with the Phillies. The first time was a 4th of July game against the Expos. The Phillies had a 1-0 lead with 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning. He had 2 strikes on Brad Wilkerson, gives up a 2-run homer. Phillies lose the game 2-1.
Ooh.
Second time was the next year. It was 2003, and it was a tie game. It was 1-1 in the top of the 9th inning, and Jose Mesa gives up a grand slam against Arizona. Phillies ended up losing the game like 6-1 or 7-1 or something like that. So
you're saying he beat out Robin Roberts in your bracket?
Absolutely. He's run the table. He's going all the way to the championship.
Yeah.
Now,
a guy who never had to put out pitch in his entire fucking career.
Oh man. But realistically, Chase Utley. I mean, come on. Like this part of the bracket, there's some nice names in there, but Chase Utley, I don't see anyone challenging him. He's going all the way to the Final Four.
Did anyone have someone different than Chase coming out of this bracket by chance?
You know what? I originally was going to go with Chase, but I think I changed my mind.
Did you go with Victorino?
No.
Jason Worth?
I'm torn between 2 people.
All right, man. Lay them on us.
I'm torn between Worth and Papelbon.
What the fuck?
Dude,
My goodness, man.
Jonathan Papelbon was such a prick, but Jonathan Papelbon was so good.
What
like
the
I don't
shit?
think like I would say he's like obviously he's not any like Mariano Rivera, but like he is truly one of the best closers in modern history. And you can't he's up there. He's up there. I'm sure other people.
And he's coming from the same bracket as the guy who had the perfect season and recorded the final out of the 2008 World Series.
You know, I'm still torn. I'm still up there between him and Worth. I like Jason Worth.
I can't stand both.
I'm fine with Jason Worth. I don't care. I don't understand why
I'll
people hate him so
put it
much.
to you this way. I did write down Utley. To start, but I didn't want to be, I wanted to break the chain a little bit.
That's fine. You wanted to be the Shane of that bracket. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Not so much with your potential selection, but look, for all of our sanity, can you just take Jason Worth then?
Biscuit, I think you might be on the same drugs as Tiger King.
for your sanity, Shane. Also, I just want to point out you said geeked earlier. I would consider that a millennial term. I'm just throwing that out there.
Geeked. If you call someone a geek and you consider yourself to be geeked, I feel like that's like the most like 50s and 60s slang out there.
I only hear people my age say I geeked when I saw that, in terms of like, laughing like, oh my gosh, that was really funny. I geeked.
Ah, tits. All right. Well, I will have a story by the end of the show then.
Okay. I have a story too, right?
You do, yep.
You have one, and so does the other Joe.
Ooh.
So
Okay,
we'll get
Borg has had his tally up on the board since like the first day that we kept track of this, and he hasn't been on a show since then.
Oh yeah. All right, Andrew, I assume you went with Chase then.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So everyone who's ever listened to me talk has already heard why I love Chase Utley, so I'm going to leave mine at that. So why don't you go ahead and let everyone know why you selected Chase out of this bracket and not Jonathan Papelbon in the uber close race that was.
I had to go with Chase. I mean, first off, he was a fan favorite. I mean, there was not a fan, I don't think, that didn't like him. He was just a blue blood player that Philadelphia loved. I mean, he went out there, did his thing every day. He never took a play off, whether it was a weak ground ball to first, a hard hit ground ball to first. He was going to run full speed. I mean, even when he comes back from a hip surgery, he's diving after every play almost. And, I mean, who doesn't love the fake throw to first, throw out at home?
Yes.
In the World Series. So, I mean, there was just never like a knock on Chase Utley, and he just knew how to. And he's never the fastest guy either, but he knew when he could steal a base, and he knew how to read pitchers, and also he was a Mets killer, so another great thing for Chase Utley. So
anyone who kills the Mets, we dig, for sure. Yeah, Chase Utley. I mean, you almost don't get more Philly than that. So. Definitely an iconic Philadelphia Philly, an iconic athlete in the city, and I think he always will be. So before we get to the right side of the bracket, Biscuit, do you want to give your story now or you want to give it after?
I'll give it after. All
right, we'll break it up. We'll give it after. That's fair. All right, so I'm going to start with you then on this one, see if you piss me off. Who are you taking out of the top right bracket here for reference for everyone?
Right. Who did I choose from the top right? Let me
It's the Carlton bracket. Carlton, Roland, Zinski, Hamels, Schilling, names like that.
So I'm going to be honest. I only chose people, not that I don't know of the players, obviously the 2007 run, but that's really what segued me into baseball. So I chose all 4 players from that realm of time.
That's fine.
So for this one, I went with one of my personal favorites. If I had to pick my favorite Phillies pitcher, first it would be Doc. The second, it would be the man, the myth, the legend, Cole fucking Hamels.
Oh, you and Scott.
I love Cole Hamels. Hollywood, the man's a stud, beautiful man.
We do appreciate good-looking guys on the team.
Flawless pitcher. I think.
All right, keep going.
He's up there. He's one of the Philly great pitchers.
Yeah, he is. I am not going to pretend to be the biggest of Cole Hamels fans, but I don't knock what he was able to do in that 2008 World Series.
Yeah,
would have had a second one had he not sucked in 2009, but that is what it is.
Yeah, you could throw a lot of scapegoating at him, I guess. Or I shouldn't really say scapegoating. He was pretty fucking bad.
Yeah. It was not good.
He was not good. I don't even want to. I was gonna pull up the numbers, but I don't even want to because I just know it's not pretty. My big Cole Hamels memories, the no hitter with the Cubs. We kind of talked a few podcasts ago, and one of the reasons I love baseball so much is because on any given night, something extraordinary can happen. And it was just one of those games, you can't write a better story than what he did with, in his last game as a Philly, where he spent his entire career. Everyone kind of knew he was going. It was kind of tough. There were a lot of emotions, and for him to just go out and be able to completely dominate the Chicago Cubs and that evil Odubel Herrera for almost, ruining it with dropping that ball. But thankfully he held on. And, I feel like T-Mac, people either love T-Mac or hate him, but that was another one, the end of that game, his calls, they still give me chills. It's one of my favorite baseball memories.
So before the rest of us give our thing on this, and you brought up a kind of a polarizing name in Phillies, current Phillies. I love McCarthy. Does anyone else not enjoy him, or does anyone not enjoy him, I should say?
I love his calls.
I like right. Tom McCarthy. I'm not crazy about Ben Davis and John Kruk, and I don't like
Ben
the
Davis
way.
Sucks.
Yes,
oh my God, man.
I almost wish I love when I wish J-Roll was full time doing it.
Too.
I like J-Roll. I thought J-Roll played up. He was kind of humorous. T-Mac, I feel like with T-Mac and John Kruk, they go in these moments where it's awkward silence. They don't really know how to keep the conversation engaging with each other. I think it kind of just fizzles out until something refreshing happens. I do like T-Mac. I don't care for the rest of the booth, though.
I think that's fair. I don't hate Kruk. I like some of his dry, real responses. But there's only so many times where you can really do it, and there's only so far he can really take it. So I get why people don't particularly love him in the booth. I do really like Tom McCarthy, though. He was certainly an acquired taste for me. We're all kind of tainted, I think, because we obviously grew up with one of the greatest voices, most iconic voices in sports history, in Harry Kalas, voice of us, voice of NFL films. He was incredible. So I think it's tough when you start seeing anyone else in that booth. But I think he's done a really, really nice job. Ben Davis just eats my ass. I hate that guy.
The square.
He is such a piece of shit.
Kilt.
He's such an asshat. Dude, I hate that guy.
I just want to ram my head through the television screen every time he said that after a home run.
Yeah, he's terrible.
Yeah, LT Kilt. Oh God, I could hear it in his little cringy voice.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Yeah, I can't stand him. But all right, yeah, no, I needed to get the feel on that one because I know a lot of people don't particularly like T-Mac, but like I said, I'm for it.
Yeah, real quick on Tom McCarthy, I think I think the big thing with him is I like the way he does the game. I think he can be really good, and I think he does a good job for the most part. I think the thing with some announcers is so many guys also feed off their color commentator as well.
Oh, yeah.
And going off what you guys said, I don't think Ben Davis and John Kruk is the perfect fit for him. I think Kruk is better suited for the pre- and post-game show. I think him and Metallica could do a great job on there. But that's why I think McCarthy kind of struggles sometimes, is just because I don't think he goes well with those two guys. Like, because I don't know if you guys ever listened to him do some of the college basketball games in the March Madness or the conference playoffs, and then even how he does some NFL games when that starts up. And I think he does a great job with some of those guys he mixed with. So I think he does a great job all around. I just don't think he's with the right guys to work with.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've said this for so much on these shows. When you have a dumbass out there like Ben Davis, who's incorrectly spelling and speaking words with ridiculous, just he's such an ass clown. I can't stand the guy. And then you have Tom McCarthy there, who's got to sit there and either be like, you're a fucking idiot, like he probably wants to say, or he has to play into the stupidity of his fucking co-host. And he's got to sit there and just be like, that is an interesting point. Like, it's not a fucking interesting point, man. Just move on. Move on a topic. I'm going to go into a rant because I loathe Ben Davis so much. There are certain people who I don't understand how they have jobs. He's one of those guys. Like, just, oh my God. Him talking about his fucking playing career like he meant anything. What a piece of shit.
Oh gosh, one of my favorite songs. He did I think the pregame show one time, and you know how they like go onto like the fake diamond and they
please
stand
tell
in
me
the
it's
bat.
when he was holding the bat. Yep. Fuck.
So
This
when
guy.
I was a hitter,
you were never a
Ricky,
hitter. You were a piece of shit.
this is how I squared up in the box, and I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ, we
Oh,
are really
yeah.
doing.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
Hey, if you
I
guys ever want a job with NBC Philly, just go be a failed backup catcher for the Seattle Mariners.
that's it.
Yeah.
Waste of a second round pick or whatever he was. All right, so let's get off the ranting topic. Sorry for anyone who just had to indulge me for just a quick minute on my hatred for that man. But we went with Cole Hamels out of this bracket for Biscuits. Rob, let's go to you for yours. Your representative out of that column.
Oh man, this is kind of tough. I mean, I was a big Cole fan when he was here, and obviously Steve Carlton did many great things in a Phillies uniform, but I never got to see it because I wasn't born. So I'm gonna have to go with my boy Jimmy Rollins, the greatest shortstop in Phillies history, 2007 MVP. Guaranteed the Phillies would win that division that year, and they did, and that's a huge reason why I always loved him as a player. So yeah, Jimmy Rollins getting that Final Four nod for the upper right bracket, and you know he was kind of inconsistent with the bat. He had that one MVP season where he had the quad 20, what was it? Steals, doubles, triples, homers. I think he actually had 30 homers that year. He hit nearly 300, won the MVP award. He's kind of hit or miss with the bat. He had some good seasons and some bad ones, but defensively, he was so consistent. He was, for all those years, the best defensive shortstop in all of baseball, in my opinion. And he was a huge reason of why they were so good, why the pitchers had the success that they did, because they could go out there and they knew they had a great middle infield between Jimmy and Chase, and they could just go out there and make their pitches and trust the defense behind them. So Jimmy Rollins, his bat was good more often than not, but his defense is such a huge reason of why he was such a key player for those Phillies teams.
Yeah, I dig the Rollins pick, kind of. I wasn't a Rollins fan, but I understand what he meant to this franchise. And it's hard to argue. So I'm going to leave it at that with the Rollins thing. I'm going to go to Andrew, who I think is probably also Jimmy Rollins. Go for it.
I'm actually not, and I know I'm going to receive a lot of hate for this one probably. But I'm a big...
No, you're a Scott Rowland fan. That's right.
I'm a diehard Scott Rowland fan, so he has made my Final Four. And I know it's going to receive a lot of Philadelphia hate, but I just think he's a tremendous player. Rookie of the Year, great glove, great bat. I know it wasn't with the Phillies, but an eventual World Series champion. And I love the stories about Steve Carlton that my dad said, and I actually got to meet him, went to an autograph signing. That's one of my things I do as a big autograph collector. So I got to meet meet Steve Carlton once, and he was a nice guy, but just because of how much I love Scott Rowland, I had to go with him over that, and then eventually go with him over J-Roll for the Final Four, just because I grew up with him. My favorite player is the first jersey I ever had when I was younger, and I just thought it was cool. He won the Rookie of the Year the year I was born at the time when he was a Philly, so I rode with him.
Nice. I also was a big Scott Rowland fan, so I'm pretty okay and accepting of that one. Rob, I know on the last podcast, said that he would have been one of the ones who was booing the crap out of you, which is hilarious. But Biscuits, I never got a response on you. What was your take and feel on Scott Rowland over there?
He was kind of out of the picture before I really got into baseball. I only kind of really first heard of him once he was on the Reds, and that he had some beef with the organization. That's why everyone booed at him. He got plunked a few times. But going back and just looking at his stats, what could have been if he stuck around and,
we almost really acquired him.
Yeah. Well, he wanted to come back from, I believe, what I read somewhere. He actually wanted to come back. Who was the last person? Like, obviously, since Mike Schmidt, we've never had like a solidified like third baseman who could fucking rake. And I think Scott Rowland was like the closest thing we had to that. But he was here for only like a handful of seasons?
Like 6, I think.
Yeah, I think it was about 5.5, 6 seasons.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Hell of a baseball player. I know he's kind of like one of those players like Utley where he's like knocking on the door of the conversation of Hall of Fame, but he's not really quite in the mix.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, nice poll, Andrew. I went with another name that no one else was going to choose. I went with the 13th seed, Manny Trio, specifically for what he meant to me. Obviously, I never got to watch him play live. But the person who probably means most to me, in this world was my grandmother. And I remember very few things about like my actual growing up. But the one thing that I always remember was going over to my grandmother's house, watching as many Phillies baseball games and ignoring the rest of the family during the entire time that we were there, and just watching just endless hours of baseball, talking baseball forever. And Manny Trio was her favorite player, and I used to hear the same 4 or 5 stories the way that grandparents are and tell you over and over and over again, but it never got old. And still, to this day, when people ask me, who are some of my favorite Phillies, Manny Trio's name is always one that comes up, and it always brings a smile on my face, because the reason I got into baseball was my grandmother, and her favorite player was Manny Trio. So for me, out of that bracket, probably not the name that very many people are going to choose out of that one, especially out of a 13th seed there. But for me, what he meant, going to go with Manny Trio.
By the way, that's another great Harry Kalas call right there. That Manny Trio game-winning triple against Houston.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, so let's we're approaching an hour and a half, so let's do this last one pretty quick. Andrew, creator of the bracket, who is your final for on the bottom right bracket, the final bracket there?
I went with Ryan Howard just because the great years he had here, the home runs. Again, some fans loved him, some fans were not a fan of him, but I think he was always a funny guy. He interacted. Another guy I got to meet and actually eventually won an autographed jersey from him on a Fan Appreciation Day one time. So I think just that kind of story helps with that sense. And again, he was just always a funny guy, always interacted with the fans down on the first baseline when he'd go over and sign autographs. So I think that kind of stuff always helps me with guys I like. So Howard won this region for me.
I feel like that's probably going to be a lot of guys from this category. Rob, I'm going to go to you. Who do you have?
Oh man, well this is tough because I was a big Ryan Howard fan while he was here. He had so many great seasons. Was a big part of that 08 team, and this is a guy who was before my time. Played for the Phillies before I was born, but he's one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and made that huge play in the 1980 World Series where he catched the pop-up that bounced out of Bob Boone's glove, and he was there to catch it. That was a huge play to help them win that World Series, and that is Pete Rose.
All right, man. Taking Pete. It's a bold take. A take I like. Good for you. Biscuits, who is your last bracket pick here?
The man who I think, if he was not on that 07 to 11 run, they would not have won the World Series in 2008, Ryan Howard.
Okay.
Starting with 05, you got Rookie in the Year. Next season, MVP, finished top 5 in MVP in 07. He almost won it again in 08. Third in 09. Placed 10th both in 2010 and 2011. That stretch from 2005 and 2011, I have the stats up now, and it's God to see a production like that on the Phillies now. It's a real sin what happened afterward with him being injured at the end of the 11 season. He still, had some good years left in him, but I think that set him back. And I also think he just didn't adjust like other major leaguers could. I think he got figured out and never found a way to kind of readjust and get back in a groove, because obviously the rest of his career was pretty abysmal. But for that stretch of time, man, like, wow is all I have to say. He was my favorite. I loved watching him.
Yeah, I think one of the more painful like ends and like fizzling out of a career for a Philadelphia athlete, was him. Certainly, honestly, the last year of Halladay as well. But yeah, definitely one of the greats in Phillies history. My name I'm gonna pull out of this one. It's gonna be different again. Is 2/3 of the earth is covered by water and 1/3 is Gary Maddox. Another player I did not have the opportunity to obviously watch during their playing days, but it was in high school when I transitioned after several knee injuries. I transitioned from shortstop to center field, and his highlight tape was the tape that I was instructed to watch over and over and over again. You start to fall in love with the way that a player approaches their position defensively. And then you get to watch, what they were able to do with the bat as well in a time where, power swings weren't quite as present as they are, certainly not as present as they are now, but as present as they were going to be. But he had such a natural swing as well. So for me, out of that bracket, I'm going to go with Gary Maddox. Did we get Andrew? Do I have yours on this one? You went Ryan Howard, so we have everyone's, right?
Yes.
All right. So we already explained why we like all these people. We'll get to the reasons as to why we have our eventual winner on another pod. But let's just give our winner, since we've already given them through. We're over an hour and a half at this point. Anyone who stuck with us, I'm fucking shocked, but I love you guys. So Rob, who was your eventual winner out of your final four?
My eventual winner was Chase Utley.
Chase Utley. Biscuits, yours.
I want to say Doc, but I'm going to go with Howard. I loved Ryan Howard.
All right.
Like I said, I don't think you would have 08 if you didn't have him.
I think that's fair. And then Andrew, creator of the bracket, what did you have?
I also ended up going with Ryan Howard.
Nice. And then I went with Manny Trio. I feel like the process to getting to this Final Four was actually probably more interesting for each of us individually. So I feel like if there's ever a pod that we are on and it's just two people, part of that pod can go through the individual matchups to get to the Final Four and the eventual champions that we chose. And that can be part of those podcasts, because I'm sure there are some pretty good stories there. There are several matchups that you have there, Andrew, that were, had me, like I said, rewriting brackets out because I wasn't satisfied with my answer. There were some pretty awesome matchups you had worked up. But before we go and sign off for this one, Biscuits, you owe a story. I also owe a story. We're going to go with you first, since I don't agree with you whatsoever that I should give one, but I'm going to give it anyway. So go ahead. All right.
So this is going to be short, sweet, to the point. Obviously, I'll provide a little more context on how awkward the situation was, but I walked in on my friend's dad taking a shit once, and that sucked.
You're such an asshole. I was literally just about to say a very same story. So, all right, no, go ahead, man, go.
They didn't have a lock on their bathroom door, which, in modern day, what the fuck? So I was like, all right, like, door's open, I'm coming in, and there he fucking was, like it's, back in the day, reading the fucking newspaper. We made the most awkward eye contact. It was like a deer in the headlights. You just couldn't look away. It was like a fucking slow burning crash. And I was just like, I'm so sorry. And I shut the door and walked out. And I never wanted to relive the moment again. But then he made a joke about it later. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Why you got to bring it up like that in front of your whole family? Like, everyone fucking knows now. I was trying to keep it to myself, pretend, we didn't see each
Dad
other.
joke.
Oh, gosh. He was like, oh, yeah, I stunk it up. You got to use the upstairs one. And I'm like, well, thank you. I already fucking, went upstairs and pissed. But,
Jesus.
I'm glad you think it's funny because I'm traumatized.
So my story was going to be very similar. So now I feel like eventually I'm going to have to come up with a different story. But so I bartend for weddings, and we bartend at one specific wine yard for the most part, and it has the one restroom has only one stall, and it's like a fucking large ass handicap stall with a toilet all the way in the far corner, which is ridiculous. So you can't tell if anyone's in there, and it has one of those like awkward like clip latches at the very top that like definitely doesn't actually latch ever. So you can't tell if there's another fucking person in there. The other bartender that was bartending with me was a guy who had broken his back recently and was having trouble with everything in his life. Couldn't get himself off the fucking toilet.
Oh, no.
So I walked in there and I was like, all right, I need to change real quick because we were setting up for the wedding. So I needed to like put on my like suit type thing that I'm, bartending in. So I went in to go change. So I brought my backpack in with me, and like I just walked in, pulled the door, and like didn't even look in the far fucking corner in like the Canada of the goddamn stall to realize that there was a person in there, and he's a large man. So I don't know how I didn't peripherally see him. I just like casually with headphones in, wasn't paying attention to shit, closed the door with a guy shitting and not being able to get out of the stall in time. And like, I'm just like starting to take my shirt off, and I'm like, what the freak the hell out. And he's like, what's going on, brother? You can change. It's all good. And I'm like, we're not all good. I have to bartend with you all night with your doo-doo fingers, serving people drinks. This is probably how Corona started. I don't even know. So that was a miserable experience in my existence. So for me, and again, he was also an older guy, so like very dad jokish, where like he felt the need to bring up the awkward thing versus me, who's just like, let's just never speak of this again. And he's like, we're definitely going to talk about this again. I was like, well, you're a piece of shit. But yeah, so me and Biscuits, similar stories. That's shitty, literally. God damn. All right. So I don't think Andrew yet has any stories, because Andrew doesn't have bad takes and he speaks like an adult. Rob is all caught up on his stories. Now me and Biscuit are also caught up. So we have Boric left, and I think that's the only one who owes anything, right, Rob?
Yeah, I just sent the updated violation count out, and Boric still owes his story from like the first time Boric did a story, but then he did something after that warranted another violation. And he still owes a story for that.
Gotcha.
I think Shane called him out for something last night.
I did. Yeah, I don't remember what he said. He said
Wait,
dope.
Did you?
Yeah. He said
okay, so
dope
then
as fuck.
he owes two stories then.
There you go. Yeesh. Can we
Shane,
survive?
I'm like you, Shane. I don't like any of the slang stuff. So I try to keep it plain, simple, and don't abbreviate anything. Don't use any of the slang. And it's very rare if you'll catch me saying one of those words. And I'll even go as far as say I don't even use emojis at all, really. I'm just a plain, boring person, I guess.
Same.
Are emojis taboo too?
I don't use emoticons at all. So
emoticons.
Yes,
Oh
because that's
my
what
God.
they're fucking called. But yeah, I'm not into that, man. Like, it's just not my thing. I don't know. I'm old. All right. I just like to fish and fuss, and that's it.
Millennial who hates millennial slang.
Well, I do hate my own kind. All right, so we are approaching an hour and 40 minutes. We're going to wrap this one up. This is, I feel like, a pretty entertaining show with the several topics that we're able to talk on. One thing that we want to keep reminding you guys, certainly as this pandemic is now extending for another 3 weeks, if you have the means to do so, please support local businesses. So your local pizza shops, your local restaurants, and food markets, whatever is there and still open and deemed essential, that you can go in and support, even if it's something you don't need right now. Like, buy a couple gift cards or something and give them out like towards the holidays, anything. because that, again, may be the difference in, someone's life and whether or not they can afford to put food on their, family's plate at the end of the week. It makes a huge, huge difference, now more than ever. So please be sure to do so. One of the places you can visit is HG Coal Fire. They're in the center of Warrington. Definitely reach out, give them a call. They do delivery if you're local to the Warrington area. Warrington, Warminster, Chalfont, possibly Doylestown-ish, Horsham, anywhere in that kind of a circle, they'll deliver. They also do pickup, obviously, as well. Their restaurant is set up right now with little hubs for each of you to go into. So you are always 6 feet away from people. So they're doing their part in keeping you safe, but also keeping you fed, and their food's delicious. And then you can also always go to Just Food, which, Rob, they are still open. I meant to tell you that the other day from the end of the other pod. So any of you guys who listened to the last pod, Just Food is still open. We weren't sure of it. We did finally get word from Asian Rob that they're open. So one of their locations is at the Del Valle Market, which, again, smaller market. Support them. That is at the Del Valle University College. And then the other is in Buckingham Square. I think it's Buckingham Square is what it's called in Buckingham, PA. And that is the location that Rob works out of. You guys can get trays that are going to last you for, a week and a half. You could freeze portions of them. You guys can pick up just sandwiches for yourself. I believe they're setting up DoorDash now so that you can, have a Dasher pick up your meal from there if you're unable to leave your home right now. But their food's excellent. Asian Rob's an awesome guy. The entire staff over there is phenomenal. So definitely try to support them. Their number is 215. What the hell is their number, Rob? Now that I'm blanking on it. 215-794 food. 215-794-3663 is Just Food. So that'll be their Buckingham location. But anything you order, even if you order it for the Del Valle Mart, it'll go through there and then it'll get processed over in the other one if you need it. But they're excellent people over there. Give them your business and give anyone that is still open your business. It really does help. But that is going to be it for PTBNL tonight. You can always find the PTBNL show on Twitter. It is at ANYP Phillies. That is run pretty much exclusively at this point by our guy Sean. Sean's Twitter handle is at SeanNew27. So that's SeanNew 27. And then you can find the guys who are not on this show, which is Boric, which is at JJ Boric 26, or Scott. He is at SP Novik. And Rob, where can the people find you, and what other links are you working with?
At radio_Rob, that's my personal, and also the Disciples of Ed, if you care to follow the flyers. We're going to get some new shows out pretty soon. You can find that on Twitter at Disciples of Ed.
Yes, sir. Biscuits, where can we find you, sir?
We can find me at Broseph Biscuit on Twitter, both B's capitalized.
All right. And then, Andrew, thank you again for creating that bracket. We know you're in the process of creating a processing error one, which me, you, and Scott need to do, by the way, for a Sixers show, which absolutely. I think would be hilarious.
That would be a fun one.
That would be excellent. But where can the people find you and your links on Twitter?
So first off, a podcast to do with my brothers, Philly Sports _ now. And then another one I do with Joe Bork on this one, True _ Philadelphia Sports. And then one I do with a buddy back at school, Pub Sports Radio. And that's just right now through the quarantine, we're just going through old school games. So that's just a fun one. And then my personal one, AJ _ Santangelo. And I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but I'm pretty active on Twitter. So if anyone ever needs someone to reach out to through these tough times or something, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty active on Twitter, as you guys know, with a bunch of different stuff. So feel free to just message me if you need somebody to talk to. That goes for anybody listening or anything. I'd be glad to talk with anyone.
That's awesome, man. We appreciate that. Hopefully the listeners do as well. You can find me on Twitter. The personal is at Shane _ Mead. The ANY Podcast Network Twitter is at ANY Podcast. That is primarily only an announcement page now. So that is basically just when new shows drop, they go there first. So it is important that you follow that just so that you know when shows are being released if you follow us on Twitter at all. And then I am also on Whiskey Ramble Show with Baby Steve over there. That's at Whiskey Ramble PC. and then I do Brotherly Pod, which at this point is kind of just waiting for hockey to come back. It is a tough time over there for Negative Dan. I think it's Negative Dan. Angry Dan? Negative Dan. Dan the Flyer fan. You know, he's on Twitter. But thank you guys for sticking. This is probably our longest episode to date. Normally we keep ourselves to an hour and 15 or so. We are right around that hour 45 right now. So thanks for hanging with us. We will be back with additional episodes probably in the coming days. I know I'm going to get Sean and Boric on. We'll probably go through their brackets as well, since they were unable to get on tonight, I should say. But other than that, stay safe. Keep in touch with your families if you guys do need anything. If you want more content, different content, if you want to jump on a show, we are doing this via Skype at this point. You'd be more than welcome to come on for a show and either ask us questions or we can ask you questions, whatever you want. But we are certainly open to that. Some of you guys have asked already. So, but other than that, stay safe, everyone. Take this thing seriously. Stay in if you can. And if you are deemed essential, just be sure that you are taking all the necessary precautions, both for you and anyone you may come in contact with. But we will see you guys in the coming days. That's it for PTBNL tonight. So I'm signing off for Rob, Joe, and Andrew. I am Shane.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.